Have you ever wondered how a man can fight with God, or what this means for us today? Stay with me until the end of this story, and together we will uncover one of the most enigmatic and powerful moments in Scripture. Get ready to connect deeply with the life of Jacob, a man who, like many of us, faced his fears, mistakes, and in the end found transformation by confronting the Creator himself. The night was dense, the silence broken only by the sound of the wind passing through the desert. Jacob was alone, his emotions in turmoil. He knew that the next day he would face Esau, his brother, the very one he had deceived years before by stealing the birthright blessing. Jacob wasn't sure what awaited him, reconciliation or revenge. Everything was at stake, and the guilt of the past seemed to suffocate him. But who was Jacob? Before becoming one of the most important patriarchs in the Bible, he was known for his cunning and ability to manipulate situations for his own benefit. Since birth, he had been grasping at his twin brother's heel, as if trying to win from the very first moment, and his life continued in this way: craftiness, strategy, and escape. He stole the blessing that belonged to Esau and spent years running, until now, when everything was about to change. That night, while his thoughts weighed on him like a storm, something extraordinary happened. A mysterious man appeared and began to wrestle with Jacob. The text in Genesis 32 doesn't make it clear who this man was immediately, but soon we realize he wasn't an ordinary man. Imagine the scene: Jacob, exhausted, facing a physical and spiritual struggle, not fully understanding what was happening. He resisted, fought with all the strength he had, but the opponent was unlike anyone he had ever faced. Why would Jacob wrestle with God? And more importantly, why would God allow this fight? This is where the story challenges us to reflect. Jacob wasn't just wrestling with a celestial being. He was confronting everything he was: his craftiness, his deceptions, his constant need for control. And above all, he was face to face with his human fragility. How many times do we also wrestle this way, trying to control our lives, hiding our mistakes, facing fears that seem larger than we can bear? The struggle continued until dawn. Jacob was exhausted, but something inside him wouldn't let him give up. That's when the man touched the joint of his hip and dislocated his thigh. With a single touch, God showed who was really in control. The pain was unbearable, but Jacob didn't let go. He held on tight, insisting, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." This moment is crucial. Jacob, the deceiver, the man who had always depended on his own strength, was now completely vulnerable. He no longer had tricks or strategies. All he had was a cry, a desperate need for a blessing that would change his life. And God responded. The man asked, "What is your name?" It wasn't just a question. It was a confrontation with who he was. Jacob had to admit his identity, the deceiver, the usurper. But God, in his grace, didn't leave him in that state. He said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with God and with men, and have prevailed." Do you see the power in this? Jacob didn't win because he was strong or skilled. He won because he didn't give up. He won because at last, he recognized his complete dependence on God. The name Israel, meaning "he who wrestles with God" or "Prince of God," marked the beginning of a new identity. Jacob was no longer defined by his mistakes, but by the grace of God that transformed him. When the day dawned, Jacob limped away, with the mark of that struggle etched on his body. God's touch had left him physically weaker, but spiritually stronger than ever. He had met God face to face, and more than that, he had discovered who he truly was. And what does this mean for us? We all have our struggles. Sometimes they are with our fears, our past, our mistakes. Other times, we feel like we're fighting directly with God, questioning his plans, resisting what he wants to do in our lives. But just like Jacob, these struggles are not the end. They are the beginning of something new. He uses these moments to transform us. So, let me ask you, what are you facing today? What is the struggle that seems impossible to overcome? Perhaps it's time to stop fighting with your own strength and hold on tight to God, just as Jacob did. Don't be afraid to cry out for his blessing, to ask for his intervention. Because just as he did with Jacob, he can also give you a new identity, a new direction, and a new life. Jacob entered that struggle as a man filled with craftiness and fears. He left as Israel, a man marked by God's grace and power. And we, when we surrender to him, can also leave transformed by our struggles. Hold on to this reflection. What name does God want to give you today? What part of your life does he want to transform? Remember, he is not here to destroy you, but to transform you. The God who wrestled with Jacob is the same God who fights for you and